here's your host, John Chapman.
All right, welcome to the episode. The 49ers Rush podcast got a treat for you today. We have Ari Meroff of My Sports Update, who you got to admit, probably one of the best pulses on the NFL in general as a whole. Really, really excited to have him on, and if you do not follow him on Twitter, I don't know what you're doing. At My Sports Update, if you just want a perfect glimpse of what's going across the NFL, this guy's got it better than anybody. Ari, welcome to the show, sir.
I appreciate it, John. I'm good to be here. And you know, it's been a pretty weird offseason. It's been a busy offseason, but we got through it. A lot happened, and I'm looking forward to talking about it a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, we always cover the 49ers here. There's no secret about that on the 49ers Rush podcast. But what I wanted to do, I wanted to step back and kind of take a picture of, you take a glimpse of the forest instead of the tree and just the 49ers, and see what has happened to the NFL landscape through this offseason in the draft, and just kind of see who these contenders are, who stepped up into the playoff picture. And what we're going to do is we're going to divide it up into two segments. We're going to focus on the AFC first, then we'll jump over to the NFC, and just kind of take a glimpse of the NFL landscape as a whole. And also, you know, I do want to just go ahead and plug this. One of my favorite podcasts that I've listened to in a while, Ari, you had on Adam Schefter just a few short days ago. I have to say that was an awesome podcast to listen to. And again, just real quick, could you plug your podcast for my listeners, just in case they don't already subscribe? But if they don't, you better head over there. It's a great podcast. But Ari, go ahead and give us a quick rundown.
Yeah, sure thing. We actually just had Adam Schefter. He's a good friend of mine. He came on Monday, and we really talked about everything. It's the My Sports Update football podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your podcast. And we really talked about all the latest news in the NFL, you know, the NFL schedule, how this pandemic could make an effect on the NFL. And we spoke about his career as well, and he had some good stories in there. I highly recommend people to check it out. So, yeah, it was a pretty fun episode.
All right. So let's jump right into it, the AFC. Now, I want to start at the top and just focus on, man, who are the major players? Like, we already know we have the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. They're definitely at the cream of the crop. But of those two teams, did either one of them increase their chances of being this kind of powerhouse of the AFC? Did they separate from the pack, or did they kind of fall back down and other teams catch up with them?
I don't think they fell back down. I mean, I think Kansas City and Baltimore, they are for sure the top two teams in the AFC. When you look at the Chiefs and you look at what they did this offseason, you're looking at a team that is bringing back 19 out of their 22 starters from their Super Bowl winning team. And you know what I liked most about what they did is when in the first round, they even add more firepower to their team. And you draft a player, an LSU running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That was one of my favorite picks of the first round, where you add him into your offense, where you already have Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins and DeMarcus Robinson, and of course Patrick Mahomes and Damian Williams. You put him into this offense as well. And what was really interesting to me is that their general manager, Brett Veach, said that he reminded him of Brian Westbrook. And obviously Andy Reid coached Brian Westbrook. And when Veach told that to Andy Reid, he said he's even better than Brian Westbrook. So imagine adding that to your offense. That is, you know, a team that's already so good. You add him as well. I think Kansas City is the top team in the AFC. Nothing has changed there. And their defense, you know, they franchise tagged Chris Jones. You know, they didn't lose any significant pieces there. So they are for sure still the number one team in the AFC. As for the Baltimore Ravens, I look at them and I wouldn't move them either. I think they're still there. They're not ahead of Kansas City for me. You know, they add Calais Campbell on that defense. You add Derek Wolfe to that defensive line. You add more players to that defense. The thing that I worry about with this team, there's two things. First of all, the AFC North is much better. It's going to be much better this year, where you look at the Steelers are getting Ben back, and you look at the Browns, I think they're going to be better this year after all the moves they made. And the Bengals, they won't be a joke. And the number two, I look at Lamar Jackson, the MVP from last year. That last year was his first official year as a starting quarterback with the playbook focused on him. I just wonder if defensive coordinators around the league during the course of this offseason are starting to figure him out a little bit. You know, last year it was something new. We haven't seen this since like Michael Vick. It is a fair question to ask, I know Ravens fans probably won't like hearing that, but it's something that you really have to think about. And then, the Ravens, their draft, in my opinion, was one of the best drafts out of all the teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree.
Where you're able to get a guy like Patrick Queen in the first round and then J.K. Dobbins in the second. Are you kidding me? These are two guys who should be going much earlier than that. And Eric DeCosta crushed it there. And then even their other pick, they had 4 third-round picks, just tremendous value there. So I really like what they did. But the question that I asked about the Ravens, I think it's a fair question to ask and to wonder about.
And it's really interesting to me, too. And there are teams in the NFL that build on identity and what they're good at and what they want to do, and they just keep retooling in those areas. If you look back to the Chiefs, they want explosive offense. So what do? They spend a first-rounder on an explosive running back. You look at the Ravens, who want to build through tough defense through the center of the defense, straight up the middle, and they want to run the ball. What are their first 2 picks? They get an inside linebacker, and then they go get a running back as well. So you have these teams that are at the top for a reason. They know what they're doing. They have a blueprint. They're not throwing darts at a dartboard. They have players and traits that they like, and they target those traits. And there's a reason why, as you said, the Chiefs and the Ravens are at the top of the pecking order. Now, staying with the AFC, there are a couple teams that have been on the fringe. Let's look at, teams like the Titans, who made it to the AFC championship. Obviously, you have the Patriots, who I think are still in the mix. But who are those teams that can kind of move up and perhaps jump into this top tier in the AFC? Who gained the most ground versus this elite tier?
So you mentioned Buffalo and you mentioned Tennessee, but I look at a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is a team that they lost their quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger last year in September, and they still somehow managed to win games and keep games close with Mason Rudolph and Doug Hodges. Now you get Ben Roethlisberger back, and from what I understand, he's progressing well. And James Conner and Juju, they didn't have great years last year, but I think they will bounce back. And they added Eric Ebron in free agency, which in my opinion was one of the most underrated signings. Those lower second-tier, third-tier signings, that's a very underrated signing. That offensive line is still top 3, top 4 in the NFL. Yeah. And the defense is nasty. We saw it last year with T.J. Watt and Devin Bush. Minka Fitzpatrick was tremendous. Bud Dupree and Cam Hayward, Joe Hayden, they have guys there. It's a real defense. And also, I really like the addition that they had in the draft with Chase Claypool, a wide receiver in the second round. Listen, we know Kevin Colbert, their general manager. He's had success picking wide receivers over the years. And I am a big fan of Chase Claypool. And I would not be shocked at all if he's a type of player who has the production like A.J. Brown had last year for the Titans. If he has that type of rookie year in Pittsburgh, I really like Chase Claypool. And I think this team is going to bounce back next year. And, we talked about the Ravens before. I would not be shocked at all if they create some competition there.
Yeah, that division's going to be a lot of fun because, I think the Cleveland Browns, another team, if we're staying in that division, I love their draft. Absolutely love their draft. They had one of my favorites. I have them in the top 3 because they were able to go out and add 4 starters, if not more, the Cleveland Browns. And I love the AFC North. And obviously with the Bengals and, they're getting their quarterback, I don't think that they're going to be a factor in the playoffs anytime soon. But the competition level, I think that there's 2 main divisions in football that are just uber competitive, and that's the NFC West and the AFC North. I think that those 2 conferences just kind of reign supreme. Do you see the Browns having an opportunity to fight with the Steelers and Ravens this year, or are they still not there?
Yes, I do. I liked the Browns last year, but I didn't like the fact that they had so much hype. This year, everything a little bit calmed down a little bit. They have a new general manager, Andrew Berry, who I really like. And then Kevin Stefanski coming in as the head coach is someone that I've heard that could really get a lot out of Baker Mayfield. And you look at this team where the offensive line was a major problem last year, right? Especially at the tackle position. Where you go into free agency, you add your right tackle in Jack Conklin. You draft your left tackle in Jedrick Wills. Now that is set up. You get another tight end in Austin Hooper. You pair him with David Njoku, right? So there's no real excuses anymore for Baker Mayfield. This offense is just loaded. We know about Odell. We know about Jarvis Landry. We know about Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. There really is no excuses for that team on offense. And I do believe that Kevin Stefanski We'll get a lot out of them. And then the defense, you know, they made some additions during free agency by adding a guy like Carl Joseph and a Kevin Johnson. These aren't flashy names, but there are players who are going to make a difference there. And I really do believe for the first time in a long time that the Browns actually will contend this year. I know they're in a tough division, but when you look at what they did this offseason, things are much quieter now, unlike last year where there was so much hype and so much attention. Now they're going into the season where everything's a little bit more normal. There isn't as much craziness, not as much media hype. And I feel like they could actually do something this year. As we said, that division is going to be tough, but I really do like what they did this offseason.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Curious to see, you know, the hype happened last year, and it was just too much. It got out of control. And, you know, I think we're finally in a position now with the offensive line upgrades that Cleveland made. I'm not a Baker guy. I never have really been. I think the talent's there, but we're finally going to see. I mean, there's no more excuses. The O-line's good. It's young, but it's good, and the skill positions they have been excellent as well there. Now, let's move on to the Patriots. We got to talk about these guys. They've been there forever. Obviously, the changes at quarterback and all that stuff, but they spent 10 draft picks, you know, in this draft, and they didn't pick in the first round. They traded back. They could have got Jordan Love. They said nope. They jumped back. They're happy with what they got. They load up everywhere else. Is it time for the Patriots to miss the playoffs, or are they still going to be in contention in the AFC East with the Bills?
This is a really tough one for me. I really don't know. And the reason really for me why I can't rule them out, the simple answer is because Bill Belichick is still there. Okay, that's the simple answer. But then again, I don't really know what to expect from this team. You know, Tom Brady's no longer there for the first time in 20 years to be a new quarterback. I spoke to Adam about this. He said if we have a training camp, it is Jarrett Stidham's job to lose. Okay, they're not going to go after another quarterback. I know Camden is out there. It does not sound like they're going to do that. So now you have this team, and Tom is not there anymore. And you look at what they have, they haven't really added much that makes me say, you know what, they still might be able to contend even though Tom is not there. What did they do this offseason that makes me go and say, you know what, they still might be able to do and make some noise? You know, the additions they made, you know, Adrian Phillips and Brian Hoyer and Demary Bird and Bo Allen, these aren't names that are going to make a major difference or tilt the scale somewhere else. That's the thing with me. And it's really going to depend on Jarrett Stidham. Is he going to be the guy who could give you above average quarterback play? Because one thing here is the defense is still good. I know they lost some key pieces, Kyle Van Noy and Jamie Collins. Those guys are no longer there. Deron Harmon was traded. But, you know, I do believe in Bill Belichick. Josh McDaniels is still there. The coaching staff, for the most part, is still there. The offensive line, it isn't considered, you know, great, but I do think it's above average. They still have to figure out what they'll do with Joe Thuney, who was franchise tagged. He signed the tag, but are they going to keep him at that high number, or could they extend him? So there are a lot of questions with this team. But if you ask me if they could still make a run at the division, I like Buffalo. I think we'll get to them later on. But I have a hard time believing that they could actually end up winning the division or actually make noise in the AFC next year. That is the way I look at it right now. But obviously, when you have Bill Belichick there who has done things that none of us could ever imagine, then it's hard to rule them out.
I feel like, you know, you look over the Patriots roster, and I just say, man, he's just got a bunch of single and double type players. Like he doesn't have the boom bust, highlight, whatever. They're just
nothing
all
flashy
role players that do their job, and there's no strikeouts, right? They're just a high on base percentage team, and they're just going to get it done. Now, before we leave the AFC, I'm a little biased here. You know, DeForest Buckner is one of my favorite players of all time. Love this kid. Whenever I told my son, my 11-year-old, that he got traded, he was very frustrated, to say the least. But the Colts, you know, they go out, they trade away the number 13 overall pick to get DeForest Buckner. They go get their quarterback. They've been very, very active, but I still think that they were able to add a lot of starters and depth in this draft. I have the Colts number 5 overall in the NFL in my power rankings. Am I too high on them? Where do you place them at?
You know, I'm very happy you brought up the Colts because I'm high on them as well. I don't know about number 5, but I would put them in the top 10. And, you know, Titans fans, they might be angry at me at this, but I look at the Colts, a team that, you know, they started off really well last year and then things kind of collapsed. But this is the best offensive line in all of football. They started every game last year together, the offensive line, and they're all back together again, right? Now you bring in Phillip Rivers, someone who knows the offense. He's been with Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni before. And we know he's not a mobile quarterback, but all those years in LA, especially, the last few years, he did not have an offensive line. It wasn't good. Now he has one, and I think we'll see a different Rivers this year. I love the first 2 picks they made in the draft with Pittman and Taylor. They add more weapons for Rivers. That is great. You add Trey Burton, who also knows Frank Reich's offense. And defensively, as you said, DeForest Buckner from San Francisco. You know how good he is. The guy is a monster. I love the trade for both sides. I understand it for both sides. We'll get to San Francisco's standpoint later on. But I think the general public does not understand just how good Buckner is. Because, no one really puts him in that Aaron Donald level. But I think he's there where the Chris Jones and Fletcher Cox, he's on that level. And you put him on a defense which already has Darius Leonard and a guy like Justin Houston, another veteran, and Kenny Moore. And they have other young pieces from last year's draft like Rocky Sin and Bobby Okereke. I like this team a lot, and keep in mind they have a third-place schedule next year, right? Because they finished in third place, so they don't have to face the Chiefs or the Patriots, who obviously aren't going to be as good, but they're going to have a third-place schedule next year. So instead of facing the Chiefs, they'll face the Raiders. So that also factors into this. So I really do like the Colts as well.
That's awesome. And the last 2 teams in the AFC that I want to talk about both made the playoffs last year. I'm going to give you a chance to maybe help out the Titans fans just a little bit, but the Titans and the Texans, we talk about competitive divisions. AFC South's not far behind from that top tier, especially if the Colts do make this jump that we think they're going to. What happens with the Titans and Texans? The Titans roster is pretty much the same. The Texans, lots of kind of shakeups and, the whole Bill O'Brien thing. But what do you do with the pecking order in the AFC South with these 2 teams?
So the way I look at the AFC South right now, I think the Colts are on top. I really do believe that. And I know a lot of Titans fans. They talk to me a lot. They're like, I'm very close with them. But it's very interesting to me because I really can't figure out if last year was the Ryan Tannehill I should expect this year. That's really my question. Last year, it's a contract year. You come in. It's a magical run. You take over. All that is great. Now you get that fat contract. You lost your right tackle in Jack Conklin. Is it going to be the same Ryan Tannehill? And I just don't really know. And, Derrick Henry is on the franchise tag. He hasn't signed it yet. You really don't know if he's happy about that. He wants a long-term deal. Are they going to get it done? And also, on the defensive side of the ball, you have to remember this. Their defensive coordinator, Dean Pease, retired. He's no longer there, and that is a pretty big loss. I know Mike Vrabel does a lot of that defense, but all the players on that team, they spoke really, really highly of Dean Pease. And he's not going to be there anymore next year. So I'm really not totally sure with this team. I do think they could end up, a borderline playoff team. Keep in mind there's going to be a 7th playoff team next year for each conference. That's pretty big in this. But I would put the Colts ahead of them. And as for the Texans, the Texans are very confusing for me. What they did this offseason had my mind blowing up a little bit. The DeAndre Hopkins trade. I spoke to a few people on this on my podcast, and all of them just can't explain it. They just really can't explain it. The fact that there were so many other receivers in recent history that have gone for first-round picks, and the fact Bill O'Brien couldn't get one out of him, and the fact that he took on a big running back contract as well, it's just kind of absurd for me. And, I had Mike Tannenbaum on my podcast, the former general manager, and I asked him about that, and he basically told me that, the way Bill O'Brien does his things, there are people in the league who actually respect it. They're like, you know what, he's doing it his way. And you know what, the thing you have to say about the Texans is that they've won the division 4 out of the last 5 years. Yeah. So as much as I want to hate on the guy, he keeps on winning. So that's the only thing about this. But my question with them is going to be, is this the year where the locker room just gives up on him? Because after all the moves they made this offseason, trading DeAndre Hopkins is pretty big. That is a player who has been there for many years, and all his teammates love him. Is this the year where, some of the players start saying, oh, this guy already, what are we going to do with him? That is really my only question with the Texans. But the fact that he's won 4 out of 5 years, they haven't had any playoff success, but the fact that he won the division is impressive, right? So that's the way I look at it. They're going to be the one team this year I'm going to be watching very closely.
It's going to be a competitive division. It's going to be fun. Now let's jump over. Let's do the NFC. And, man, I feel like there are 2 kind of juggernauts in this division, with the 49ers and the Saints. Do you have those two teams up top? And if not those two, who else would you put in that top tier?
So for me, let me start with my number one team. I still think the 49ers are on top. And, when the offseason started, I really thought there was no chance whatsoever that they bring back Arik Armstead or Jimmy Ward. And I was really impressed with what John Lynch and Parag Marathe and Kyle Shanahan and the rest of the staff over there did this offseason. Just very impressive. You cannot pay Buckner $21 million a year. They realized that early when they spoke to his agent, Joel Siegel. You know what? We can't do it. So they let his agent actually go look for a trade partner. And they were actually shocked that he was able to find a team that would pay him $21 million a year plus give up a top 15 pick. So they did that trade. They bring back Armstead. They bring back Jimmy Ward. And what they did after was actually even more impressive to me, where you let Emmanuel Sanders go. And in the draft, you get your replacement for Buckner with Kinlaw, who many around the league, by the way, they really like Javon Kinlaw. They think it's a very safe prospect who's going to come in and make an impact immediately. And Brandon Ayuk, he wasn't the guy who was getting a lot of attention when the draft was going on. There's the top 3 wide receivers, and after that, no one talked about Brandon Ayuk. But Kyle Shanahan, from what I understand, really, really loves this kid, and he's going to come in and replace Emmanuel Sanders. And the thing that I really liked most about the 49ers this offseason, Joe Staley retiring was obviously huge, a cornerstone for so many years. But they knew he was going to retire for a full week. And in this day and age, for that not to leak for a full week, and that they were able to trade for Trent Williams, was really, really impressive. And then after they make the trade, they let the news about Joe Staley retiring leak out to the public. A very impressive offseason. I know they lost some big pieces, some big names, but they were able to replace those guys. So I'm going to keep the 49ers at number one. And I think this is a team that will be back next year as the top or up there in the NFC.
Now, I think it's interesting, too. You look at the NFC West and you go back-to-back years of, the Super Bowl runner-up with the Rams and the 49ers, and I almost feel like John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan were able to learn from the Rams on exactly what not to do from a contract situation. And, you mentioned they were in a bidding war with the Saints for Emmanuel Sanders, and they offered a decent deal. They just couldn't compete. And they chose, John Lynch was asked, are you trying to win now or are you trying to build for the future? And John Lynch says, I think we can do both. And that definitely seems to be what they're trying to do.
100%. Listen, people around the league, they'll tell you that the 49ers have one of the smartest front offices in the league. What they have going over there, they know what their price is and what they want to do. They're not going to go overboard on any specific player. And as I said before, John Lynch, Parag Marathe, Adam Peters, they have a really impressive front office there, and they know what they're doing. They're making smart decisions, and you can see it. It shows right now. And the Rams, they're in a situation right now where they're kind of in a pickle. They're in cap hell a little bit. So, yeah, you're 100% right.
And now, you said you had the 49ers won. Who is kind of trying to fight for that top spot with them in the NFC?
All right, so this is a bit of a tough one for me, and I know you mentioned the Saints, but I really have it as 2A and 2B. I think the Saints are 2A, and I think the Buccaneers are 2B for me.
Okay.
So let me start with the Saints over here. There might not be a team in the NFL that has a roster as loaded as the Saints. Obviously you bring back Breeze and Taysom Hill. You put Winston in the Teddy Bridgewater role. In the Teddy Bridgewater role. So the quarterback position is set. And obviously, you finally get the number 2 wide receiver they've been looking for so long with Emmanuel Sanders. And you bring in Malcolm Jenkins, he's like the ultimate leader on defense in the NFL. If you want a leader on defense, Malcolm Jenkins is the guy you're looking for. So he's back there for a second stint. They draft a guy like Cesar Ruiz in the first round. They didn't really need offensive line help. Their offensive line is pretty much set. But you know what? Why not? Let's add him into the mix as well, have more depth. So there's really no excuse for the Saints not to be great once again this year. And I do think this will likely be Drew Brees' last year because he did sign that contract for NBC. So I do think he's moving on to television next year. So it really is now or never for them. But as for the Buccaneers, this is a team that, they always say don't get too excited for a team that does a lot in the offseason. But what they did this offseason for me is it's a lot. But, first of all, bringing in Tom Brady, obviously that's the big one. But there's more than bringing Tom Brady in. It's the fact that Jameis Winston is no longer there. The amount of turnovers and possessions that they are saving by bringing in Tom Brady and moving on from Jameis Winston is enormous. You know that, obviously, 30 interceptions, Tom Brady does not throw that many interceptions. That's huge already. But then you put in weapons like a Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and O.J. Howard and Cameron Braid and Rob Gronkowski. I mean, Tom Brady has never had these many weapons on offense. It just never happened. Even when Randy Moss was there with Wes Welker, we're talking about, Mike Evans, as I just said, all these guys. These are big-time names, and he's going to have a lot of fun there. And, of course, the offensive line as well. Getting Tristan Wirfs in the first round was huge, and Bruce Arians obviously is a quarterback's coach. So that offense is going to be explosive, like one of the best in the league, in my opinion. And the defense in Tampa Bay is something not many people talk about. Nobody really gives the team credit, but Todd Bowles, what they did at the end of the year last year, they were one of the best defenses in football. They were a top 5, top 7 defense in the league. Levante David, I've been saying this for years, is one of the most underappreciated players in the NFL. One of the best linebackers, does not get any national recognition at all. Shaq Barrett, 19.5 sacks, he is back. Jason Pierre-Paul is back. Ndamukong Suh is back. Devin White, their top 5 pick from last year, he's going to blossom even more. They have a young secondary. And, this defense, as I said last year, they were really great. I think it's only going to get better this year, especially that they're not going to be on the field as much, coming on the field after an interception. All of a sudden, they're not going to have that this year. So I really like the Buccaneers. And I'm also going to add, I spoke to their center, Ryan Jensen, last week, and he told me, hey, we're all excited about all this, but we cannot fall into the trap like other offseason winning teams have in the past. We have to do our work. And I think they will. I think they're going to be the real deal next year.
It's going to be fun to watch. I mean, it's you almost can't even make up the story that has happened with Bruce Arians going down there, and then of course Brady, and then you add Gronk, which is just the icing on the top, and then to land Wirfs. It's a storybook ending. We'll have to see how it ends, all that stuff. But let's jump over to the NFC East. Somebody's got to make the playoffs in this division every year. The Cowboys took some major steps forwards, even though the Eagles won it last year. How do you see these two teams kind of fighting it out in the NFC East? And did the Giants or Redskins actually earn their place at kind of the table with those guys?
So the NFC East is so tough. I mean, every year, first of all, I think it's been I don't remember exactly how long, but it's been a different division winner for 15 consecutive years, I believe. It's 15 or 14 or something like that. Every year, this division is a different winner. It's an unbelievable stat. So that's number one. And I think that might change again this year. I think Philadelphia won it last year, but I really like what Dallas did this offseason. First of all, Jason Garrett's no longer there. He's been there for a long time, obviously. It didn't work out. They couldn't get over the hump. Now you're bringing a head coach who has won the big game. He's won the Super Bowl. And nonetheless, he won the Super Bowl in Jerry's world. He won it in Dallas. All right, so you have Mike McCarthy there. Dak Prescott's contract situation is going to be something to watch. He is not doing all the virtual stuff right now, and for a quarterback, that is a big deal. So that is something that is very big, and we'll have to see how that pans out. But you look at this offense, and the offensive line, again, it's a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. But they get CeeDee Lamb in the draft, and another player who was just a steal at number 17. Are you kidding me? Number 17 for CeeDee Lamb to go, just absurd. You put him with Amari Cooper and Blake Jarwin, who's a tight end that they believe in a lot, and Michael Gallup, the other wide receiver, and of course Zeke. So that offense should be lethal this year. I know they had some trouble last year, but Dak gets a lot of hate on social media. I don't think Dak is a bad quarterback or a mediocre quarterback. I think he's an above-average quarterback. With all these weapons that he has, I think that the Cowboys' offense will be just fine next year. And then on defense, they made a lot of moves, and a lot of veteran moves. So I don't really know if these guys are going to be, difference makers in a big way. But, you bring in a guy like Gerald McCoy and then Tari Poe and Clinton Dix, and you re-sign Anthony Brown. And also, Aldon Smith is so interesting, and you're a 49ers guy, so you know him pretty well. I don't really know what he has left. I know he's been training with Jay Glazer at his place, but from what Jay Glazer keeps on saying, he says Aldon Smith is going to come back and wreck the league. And when you hear that, it's like, whoa, you know what I mean? So I like that. And also another thing that they had a lot of problems with last year, they lost a couple of games because of their kicking game last year. Brett Maher was a big problem last year, and they signed Greg Zuerlein, who, he kind of wasn't exactly what he was in previous years last year, but nonetheless, he's an upgrade at the kicking position. So I like the Cowboys in the NFC East. As for the Eagles, Carson Wentz, what happened there where they draft Jalen Hurts, I understand the move, but this is a team that was devastated by injuries last year. But Carson Wentz was the one guy who actually played all 16 games. And he was the one guy who, he got hurt in the playoffs on a dirty hit. So I really can't blame him for that. I can't blame him for that. I think Carson Wentz is fine. I don't agree with drafting Jalen Hurts. That's a different story. But as for this team, listen, the defense with Fletcher Cox, another underrated addition that a team made this offseason was Javon Hargrave signing from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. This guy is one of the another underappreciated player who did a lot for Pittsburgh. Now he comes to Philadelphia, pairing up with Fletcher Cox. That is pretty scary. And the secondary, listen, it was dreadful last year. Darius Slay comes in. There you go. One of the top 5 cornerbacks in the NFL. You put him in as well. So, the NFC East is going to be interesting. I do give the Cowboys the edge, but the Eagles are right behind them. And as for the other two teams, the Giants and the Redskins, the Redskins have the potential to – they're not going to do what the 49ers did last year, going from the number 2 pick to the Super Bowl. But that defensive line is nasty, with Chase Young and Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne and Mike and Ioannidis and Ryan Kerrigan and the first-round pick last year, Montez Sweat. So there's a lot of talent on the defensive line. Ron Rivera comes in. My biggest question with the Redskins is really, I don't know what I'm getting with Dwayne Haskins. So I have to see more of that before I really have a decision on them. I don't think they make the jump this year, but I think Redskins fans have a lot to be excited about. And as for the Giants, I'm from New York, and they obviously hired Dave Gettleman here. And for the first time in a long time here in New York, there's actually a little bit of excitement for what the Giants have done. Because in previous offseasons, obviously last year, where they traded Odell and the place was flaming up over here, people were going crazy. But this offseason, where they actually make some big moves, they add to the secondary of Bradbury, and they add on defense Blake Martinez at linebacker. The linebacking core last year was not good. Kyler Fackrell as well. And Daniel Jones, the quarterback there. I'm a Daniel Jones believer. I know that people thought they reached last year at number 6. But if you believe he's your quarterback, you take him there at number 6. Dave Gettleman believed in that. And he had a pretty impressive rookie year. And the offensive line now, you add Andrew Thomas to the right side for year one. They'll have Nate Solder on the left side. Will Hernandez is emerging as one of the better guards in the NFL. So finally, they fixed up the offensive line for him. Saquon Barkley, one of the best running backs in all of football. The wide receiver game with Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard. So they have a nice team coming along. I also do believe in Joe Judge, their new head coach. He's a guy who is a no-nonsense guy. He wants to get the best out of his players, just like Bill Belichick. Is that going to work? I don't know. But I really do like him as the head coach over there. And I think the Giants are a team that could go, 8-8 or even 9-7. I do believe in them that much.
Oh, wow. I think that would be very well welcomed by their fans. And, man, let's jump now real quick. I just want to talk about two teams in the NFC North. And most important, I want to talk about the Packers, okay? The draft is a big deal. And, every single time the draft gets going, everybody talks about, man, just get best player available no matter what and make it work. Well, I feel like the Packers actually tried to do that. Now, I do have some questions with the way they set their big board and all those things, but I don't think they drafted one starter. I don't think that they upgraded really one position. They did help out with a lot of backup positions and depth, but this is a team that was in the NFC Championship. Do you see their draft as just kind of like, all right, let's build for the future, or do you think that they improved their roster in 2020?
No, the draft was clearly building for the future. I mean, there's no other way around it. I mean, you take Jordan Love with your first pick, you take a running back with your second pick, and you look at the running back situation where Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are both in their final year of their contracts, right? And we all know that teams are hesitant to pay running backs. So is that something they're thinking about already? It makes me wonder when you take A.J. Dillon in the second round, and then you look at their other picks, they took a tight end in the third round. They just drafted a tight end in the third round last year of Jay Sternberger. And I really did not understand what the Packers did this year. As you said, a team that made the NFC Championship game last year, a team that is desperate for wide receiver help in a wide receiver draft that was considered as one of the best in recent memory, and they passed on all the wide receivers in this draft, not taking one at all. It's head-scratching, and, I spoke about this with Adam, and Adam straight up told me, listen, when you take Jordan Love in the first round and you take a quarterback in the first round, all that says to your starting quarterback is that he's on the clock. That is basically what it says. You don't take a quarterback and you sit him on the bench for 3-4 years, you pick up his 50-year option, you don't play him. That doesn't happen in the NFL. I know Packers fans are telling me, hey, we did that with Aaron Rodgers, but that was a long time ago. This is a new NFL. Now, when you take a quarterback in the first round, you expect him to be starting in year 1 or year 2. No one sits him for 3 years. It doesn't happen anymore. You don't see that anymore. So it's a good question to ask. And I look at the Packers. They did not improve at all in free agency. I mean, Christian Kirksey is a nice signing, but they made all their noise last year when it comes to paying guys. This year, they didn't do that much. And it really does make you wonder if, they have a general manager in Brian Gutekunst and the head coach in Matt LaFleur. They're entering year 2 together, or Gutekunst year 3, Matt LaFleur's in year 2. And it makes you wonder if they feel like, you know what, maybe we don't have what it takes to get over the top, and it's time to look ahead for the future. I really do wonder that. I mean, why would you not try to improve this team? Even at wide receiver in free agency, why not sign a guy like Robbie Anderson or Emmanuel Sanders? Why are you sitting quiet? It doesn't make any sense to me. And in the draft, as you said, going quarterback, running back, tight end as your first 3 picks, very head-scratching, very head-scratching.
I really think the Minnesota Vikings have to be the favorite in this division now. I love what they did. You move on from Stephon Diggs, which, depending on how you have them rated, whatever, but they got they got premium draft capital back, and they go get a guy, Justin Jefferson, who I think is going to step in and have more catches than Diggs did last year in year 1 in this offense. I really like what the Vikings were able to do through the draft. Do you think that they have what it takes to not only, they were in the playoffs last year and had a great record, but can they finally win the NFC North?
Yeah, the Vikings are going to be very interesting. I just said they lost to Stephon Diggs, and they replaced him with Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson was one of those wide receivers in this class that did not get enough attention. We always talked about CD and Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy. I thought he should have been in that conversation as well, and no one put him in that conversation. The Eagles passing on him was a different story. But I really like Justin Jefferson. You put him into this team. The question really with him is could he play on the outside? He really played mostly in the slot at LSU. But he's a big play guy who shows up in big games, and Minnesota's going to love him. Kirk Cousins is going to love him. But the thing about Minnesota is that they lost a lot of other players over free agency. They lost 3 cornerbacks with Trey Waynes, Xavier Rhodes, and Mackenzie Alexander. So those are 3 big losses. They also have Everson Griffin is still a free agent. They're not closing the door on that. I know Griffin said he's not coming back, but if you lose him on the pass rush, that's a pretty big loss. They also lost Jaron Kearse and Josh Klein on the offensive line. Linval Joseph was a big loss as well. So defensively, they're going to get a lot younger, and it makes me wonder if that's going to create some stumbling blocks. A team that had so many veteran presence, the guys who have been in the league for a long time, know what they're doing. Now you're entering a bunch of guys who are, rookies and year 2, year 3 guys. So is that going to create problems, especially in a year like this where we're in a pandemic, where there isn't any offseason programs as of now. There might not be any training camp, and it makes you wonder if you're missing all those veterans, if that's going to make a big difference. But offensively, I like what they did. You add Justin Jefferson, as we said. Adam Thielen is a stud. Dalvin Cook, one of the best running backs in football. Kirk Cousins had a great year last year. Didn't get enough credit, in my opinion, because he always gets hate, but he was tremendous last year. Obviously, they won the playoff game against New Orleans. So I do like their offense. I do have questions about their defense. But I would agree with you that they are the favorites in the NFC North as of now.
Yeah, it's another that's going to just be a fun watch. I don't think the Bears did enough to kind of close the gap, but we jump over, and this is kind of the steak. We saved the steak for last. The NFC West.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the 49ers. We talked about the Rams. But, man, I think the Cardinals, they're another team. Their offseason, you could not argue. Again, maybe Tampa Bay. Then I think it's the Cardinals. You go get DeAndre Hopkins for a second and change. I love that Isaiah Simmons fell to them. I think that's a perfect fit as well. And then they get Josh Jones in the 3rd round, which I think was one of the biggest draft steals out there. Can the Cardinals finally get over that hump and fight for that 7th playoff spot, even though they're in a tough division?
Yeah, I'm there with you. First of all, I love the Cardinals. If you guys listen to my podcast, I've plugged them in like 3-4 times. When I ask this question to most of my guests, which is an up-and-coming team in the NFL, and I get a bunch of different answers, but every time my guests finish their answers, I just keep on bringing the Cardinals. I really like what they did this offseason. I really do. And I look at Kyler Murray. The Cardinals didn't get any national TV games last year, no Sunday night or Monday night games, so fans around the league didn't get to see him as much. This year, they're going to be on primetime a lot. I haven't seen the schedule yet, but I assume that is going to happen. And if he has a year 2 leap like a Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, watch out for the Arizona Cardinals. Seriously, watch out for them. Larry Fitzgerald is back. DJ Humphries, they re-signed a left tackle. Kenyon Drake is back, who was tremendous last year. Obviously, you talked about DeAndre Hopkins coming. They rob him away from the Texans. Let's just say it how it is. They get rid of David Johnson's contract, which was huge, something that no one thought they'll be able to do. And then, defensively, this is a team that added a bunch of good, solid players. Nothing flashy, but we're talking about Devon Kennard, who, if you talk to Lions people, before they released him, obviously, like last year, Devon Kennard was one of those guys who's a locker room guy and a leader. You bring him in at linebacker. Devondre Campbell from Atlanta, another name that many people really don't know, but a player who had he was up there. I think he was top 3 in tackles last year in the NFL. So he'll do a lot for them. And then Jordan Phillips coming over from Buffalo, a big guy at defensive tackle. He had 8 or 9 sacks last year. You add him as well onto this defense. And, of course, Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons, a player who, I asked a bunch of people on my podcast about him, and they were really all over the map on him.